Hey guys, welcome back to wemetatacme. I'm so excited to be here with Rachel Blank, the founder and CEO of Allara Health. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, so excited to be here too.
So happy to have you. So before we start every episode, we ask, what is your favorite romantic gesture? And this is for someone to do for you.
Oh. I should have prepped this one. Mine is when my husband just like picks me up something little on the way home, like flowers, or he picks me up like a Diet Dr. Pepper a lot because it means he's thinking about me and just like gets me a little something.
I love that. Cute.
Yeah.
Kind of like gifts. Or it's like a mix of gifts and acts of service.
It's a little more acts of service. It's like a little thing like a diet soda, but it's just like that he was thinking about me on his way home.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And just to let everyone know who's listening, I have met Rachel before. She's the best. She actually did one of our women's panels.
Yes, it was so fun.
Which was so fun. Such a great group. And I remember loving your story about meeting your husband because it was, you very much had the dating experience before.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. And I will say in some ways it actually intersects with wemetatacme because I found my therapist who changed my life through wemetatacme.
I love that. Guys, if you're listening and needing a therapist, go to our website and find one.
So I had a bit of a circuitous past meeting my husband. I ended up meeting him at 32 and we got married when I was 35. I actually was in my 20s, thought I had met the person. It was a terrible relationship in my 20s. We got engaged and I called it off. So I always like to tell people like, you are totally free to make any decision about dating. Like you can call off a wedding. It's all good. And then I was single in my late 20s, early 30s in New York, which I like to say is somehow harder than like raising money. I've raised a lot of money for my business. And the harder thing was dating in New York City.
Honestly, that's good to hear.
It's very difficult. And I found this amazing therapist. And what I kind of realized, she used to say like, Rachel, when you're talking about dates, it sounds like you're talking about like an M&A transaction. And like you have this checklist and you're trying to check these things off, which for me were like, they were Jewish, they went to a certain school, they had a certain job. And I just kept doing the same thing over and over and over and like having this very specific outcome I was trying to get to. And it actually was in a therapy session, my therapist, shout out Jordan, was like, she said, I want you to do some homework for me. I want you to go on a couple dates with guys who do not meet your checklist. Just go. You don't have to marry them. You just have to go on a date or two. And so I'm swiping and I see this cute British architect who's like clearly not Jewish on Bumble. And I'm like, okay, well, at least like I'll go for a date and I'll have a nice accent and I'll probably enjoy myself for that one date. And pretty much 2 dates in, I knew that he was the one and he was my husband. But
how did you know?
I just felt so comfortable with him. And I think actually because I wasn't looking at these superficial things, I was really looking a lot more at like, what are our values? How do we feel about our families? Like he wasn't checking these boxes, right? And so he almost had a bigger, it almost in a way was like a bigger hurdle to get over because it didn't meet these check boxes. It was a little less superficial. And I just felt like, oh, wow, he really feels like somebody who I can just be myself with and talk to forever.
Also doesn't hurt that he's British and an architect.
Exactly. Yes. He's also very sexy.
Like you don't find that in New York.
No,
especially the architect thing. Like I feel like there's so many rom-coms where the like hot guy in the movie is an architect.
It's very rom-commy. I will say architects in reality is a lot more like late nights and maybe a little less exciting than you think.
Sure.
But yeah, it's very out of a rom-com. And I don't know that I ever would have even gone out with him if I hadn't reframed. And then I also think because I had reframed and it was less about, oh my God, I have to find my husband because I'm 32 and I'm like running out of time. I showed up differently. Like I showed up not as desperate, frankly. I showed up like letting him lead the charge. And so this is my advice to everybody. It's like, if you feel like you've been doing the same thing for a while, especially if you're a little older, just try shifting it up a little bit. Like maybe date outside your comfort zone, date outside your checkbox. I just think we can get very stuck in these patterns.
We definitely can. How do you think the things that you were worried about most ended up resolving? So like the religion thing, did you have to have conversations with him early on once you both kind of knew it was like going in a more serious direction?
On our second date, I asked him if he was willing to raise kids Jewish, which to be fair, if I was on a normal second date, I don't think I would have asked that kind of question because I would have been so worried about like, what do they think of me? Are they going to think I'm crazy if I ask this? But I think, again, because with him, it's not that I didn't care. I liked him, but because it it just didn't feel the same of like I'm trying to get to this next step of achieving something.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of like, well, I might as well ask, because if he says no, then we're not going to go out again.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was I think he was a bit taken aback, although he ended up proposing in that spot where I asked that question on the High Line. So I guess it wasn't so bad.
And clearly he said yes.
Yes. I think he said, I guess so, because he was very confused. But yeah, we did have conversations early on about, these are things that are important to me. I want to raise my kids Jewish. I want a Jewish wedding, which again, if he was just, if he fit these check boxes, maybe I wouldn't have had these deeper conversations with him earlier on too.
Yeah. Going back to your broken off engagement, how did you find the courage to make that choice? I know there are probably so many women listening in relationships that are not serving them, and maybe like have gone too far, aka like are committing for life and they're still scared.
Yeah. So one, I just want to recognize it is incredibly hard, and it in some ways almost made me realize why there are so many divorces. I think because it's actually really hard. Because
you're like, I'm come this far.
Exactly. Well, I remember thinking, number one, again, we had this kind of life that looked perfect on the outside. On the inside, it was not great at all. But on the outside, it looked great. He checked all these boxes. I was at HBS at the time. And so I felt like I was in this class of 900 kids, all of whom I thought knew I had gotten engaged. And I was getting married that summer. And it just felt very embarrassing to call off my wedding. Like, I really thought that.
Were you still were you going back to school after that?
I was this was during
in between 2 years.
This was while I was there. I was literally sitting in class while this was all happening. And sorry, are we going to cut out the ums and the?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. I feel like I'm being a little meandering.
And you're being great.
Okay.
Yeah, don't overthink.
So, and I remember thinking, the train has left the station. It's just gone too far. I might as well we can figure it out after the wedding. We can figure it out later. I had a lot of I can fix him kind of vibes. And frankly, partially things got really bad. And partially I just realized I don't want to live like this anymore. Right. If you told me that this was my life in a year or two, I don't think I'd be happy. And I think for some people, you have to get to that point where the fear of the known is worse than the fear of the unknown. Mm-hmm. What I will say to help people with the fear of the unknown is I really thought it was going to be so embarrassing. I thought everybody was going to judge me. I actually found the opposite. I found everybody was so supportive. Everyone told me wow, that was really courageous of you.
Yeah.
My parents were really supportive. I think we frankly assume people care more about what we're doing than other people actually care. And I think there's a lot of social pressure that you feel to take this next step, to, keep going with something that you've quote unquote committed to. And I really found that was not the case, that actually people were so supportive. And that's partially why I like to share that I called off my engagement, because I think a lot of people don't share that, or they feel very shameful about it. And it's actually really empowering.
I think it's so empowering. And I remember, I'll never forget, it wasn't an engagement, but a friend of mine broke up with her partner. They were living together. Yeah. They were 4 years in. And she was so scared for all the same reasons. Mm-hmm. She thought we would judge and this and that. And I remember we went to dinner. I remember exactly where we were, at Bar Pity in the city. We went to dinner and she told us, I broke up with so-and-so. And she was so ashamed and all this stuff. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so inspired by you. I literally then got the courage to break up with the guy I was dating.
I have chills, by the way.
Because it's so, you have no idea how positively your courage affects other people. And especially in business school, you know how many engagements broke off at HBS?
That's true. There were more than I realized.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
But I think it takes something maybe being apart for a little bit, or, I don't know that you were necessarily apart. Maybe he had moved, but it takes coming out of your environment sometimes too to realize oh, I'm happier without this person.
Yes. I think that's the other thing I realized, and that's really important. I was happier when I wasn't with him. Mm-hmm. And I realized I actually would be happier alone than I would be in that relationship. Yeah. And I truly think even if I had never met my husband, I would definitely be happier today alone than I would have been with this person.
Definitely. And that is a hard thing to kind of come to terms with, because it's obviously you have fun when you're with your friends. Like we all have fun when we're with our friends. But it's like if the people in your life are consistently being like, oh my God, you're so fun right now. And like all of those times are when that person's not around you, it adds up and you're like, okay.
Yes. And I was more fun. And I will also say, and I think this is important for, if you're a career-oriented woman, which a lot of us are, I genuinely think who you marry is so important when it comes to your career. And had I been with that person, I never would have started my business. I'm not sure I'd be in the position I am today. Whereas my husband is so supportive and has actually supercharged my business in a lot of ways.
Yeah, the wrong person can really hold your career back.
Yes.
That is a fact.
I think so.
Definitely. Speaking of your career, so you founded Allara, which I personally can relate to so much as a PCOS girl.
Yeah.
Walk back with us and tell us a little bit about how you, first of all, like got the confidence to start your own company, but also your PCOS journey and kind of what that made you realize was missing.
Yeah. I always like to say a lot of ways, I'm really just a frustrated patient who kind of had enough. And that's why I started my business.
Yeah.
I was diagnosed with PCOS in my early 20s. So I'd actually had a lot of symptoms for years. I had really irregular periods. Like I would get my period once a year. I went to college and I gained tons of weight all of a sudden. All these things that in hindsight all added up. But at the time were just kind of felt like these annoying things I had to deal with. And then in the process of investigating some stomach issues, which there is a lot of overlap between GI issues and PCOS.
Interesting.
Ended up getting kind of randomly diagnosed with PCOS by an ultrasound check. I think what was really frustrating was for years, it kind of felt like, well, I had this diagnosis, but I had nothing to do with it. I would go to the doctor and either they didn't necessarily have time to help, or I'd hear things like, well, you're not obese and you're not trying to get pregnant, so just come back when you want to get pregnant,
right?
Which when you're in your 20s is not very helpful. And I ended up going down the rabbit holes of Instagram and Reddit and really just grew increasingly frustrated. And after business school, I ended up joining a company early on called Ro, which was a telehealth company, and really frankly saw the power that you can make and kind of the change that you can make when you put decision-making in the hands of consumers. This was 2018. In a lot of ways, it was kind of the beginning of direct-to-consumer healthcare. And I just really got inspired by this idea of, well, what happens if we put decision-making power, if we put more autonomy in the hands of women and we let them make more decisions about where to go and have better conversations with providers. So ended up leaving and starting Allara really to solve this massive women's care gap that I was seeing around hormonal health conditions. So we launched in 2021, and we launched with medical providers as well as dietitians who can help diagnose patients with conditions, manage conditions. So we do medication management, symptom management, and we actually also have registered dietitians on the platform to do lifestyle and nutrition therapy too. And yeah, for me, I think it really was this personal journey of I just can't take this anymore and someone needs to build something better and no one else is coming. So I guess I should do it.
Yeah.
But I'm very glad I did.
I'm so happy you did. Also, I don't know if this thought has occurred to you. I'm sure it has. But I feel like I have had to fill out so many forms recently about like, my kid and his doctor and this and that. And I don't have a just doctor for myself. You know what I'm saying? Like
Same.
I don't have, what is it, an internal medicine doctor?
Yeah, until Allara, I didn't.
I don't have that at all. And so anything, especially as someone with PCOS, the only time that I get to even discuss my PCOS is with my fertility doctor. Mm-hmm. That's the only person who actually cares about my PCOS because it directly affected me and my fertility. But other than that, I never get to talk about it with anyone. So when I started using Allara, I was like, oh, they care. Someone cares.
I will say I think a lot of doctors care, but has the time to help, right? So we're a virtual care platform. We give patients more time with their providers. Providers are only focused on hormone health. So they actually have the time and space to really dive into some of these more complex care needs. Whereas if you're at the OBGYN practice and they're seeing 7 patients an hour and probably their waiting room is already backed up by 30 minutes, it is really tough for them to squeeze you in. And then on the fertility clinic side, there are only about 1,300 reproductive endocrinologists in all of the U.S. We actually would need right now about 5 times the amount we have just to cover the fertility needs that we have in this country.
Yeah.
And so, they really can't see you outside the scope of fertility treatment just because we don't have enough of them to go around to manage that. And so I think in a lot of ways, it actually is just there was no provider who actually had the time or the space. And so by giving these same providers a different platform, virtual, more time with patients, it really unlocked a different way of practicing.
Yeah, I feel like so many people need to know about this because especially there are so many great like endocrinologists, at least that I've, let's say, heard recently on podcasts and this and that. And it's like, now I want to I want an appointment with that person, but they're like a famous endocrinologist who has like an Instagram with like 100,000 followers. And it's like, how can I actually find someone? And then it's like, how are you supposed to know who is good for you when it comes to like the hormone world? You don't.
Right.
And so I feel like on Allara, like, if like, how would I know? Do you know what I'm saying? Like to find the right specialist for me for my PCOS on there, like it would just be paired with me
on Allara.
Yeah.
And I'll say on endocrinologist, even if you want to see a non-famous one, the wait list is probably 6 months.
To
get in. It's really crazy.
It's like so hot right now.
Yes. And we have endocrinologists on the platform. So when you onboard with Allara, we're checking 2 things. One, we actually have nationwide insurance coverage. We cover about 50% of the population with insurance right now, and we're working on expanding that as fast as possible. So number 1, we're looking at, what state do you live in, what insurance you have, making sure we're getting you in with somebody who's in network for you. But also when you come in, you're filling out things like, what have you been diagnosed with? What are your symptoms? And then we have an algorithm on the back end that will show you providers who are best fit matches for you. So pretty much all of our providers are specialists who are trained across a lot of these conditions. But for example, if you have a specific thyroid condition, we might pair you with an endocrinologist versus if you're there to discuss more, GYN issues, we have OBGYNs or women's health NPs on the platform. And also patients at any time. Like if you meet your provider and it's not a fit, we can change you to somebody else.
Totally.
But we find generally people have really great experiences with pretty much all of our providers because number 1, they are kind of more specialists in these conditions. And 2, we have protocols that we've developed with some of the leading experts in the country on these conditions that we've trained our providers on.
Yeah, it's so great. And I know obviously you're not a doctor, but as someone who now knows so much about PCOS, do you feel like your PCOS had to do, or like just PCOS in general, but specifically yours, like had to do with birth control at all? Because we hear that all the time. I don't know. All I know is that me being on birth control for 15 years was masking it. That I know for sure. But where do you stand on that?
So I can't believe that. I feel like this is a hot take right now, but I love birth control.
Yeah.
I think it's great. Now, granted, I was diagnosed before I went on birth control, before I consistently went on birth control. So I didn't have the same kind of masking issue where it was keeping me from getting a diagnosis. I personally love it. I feel like it's helped with, for example, like my cramps aren't as bad. My acne is not as bad. It can be really helpful, especially for PCOS patients. The other thing with PCOS patients, a lot of people don't realize is if you aren't getting your period regularly and you aren't shedding your endometrial lining, it can actually increase your risk of uterine and endometrial cancer. And so you do need some sort of intervention to whether it's birth control or progesterone to help manage that risk.
Wait, that's so interesting because not to be like TMI, but so I'm back on birth control and I'm on a combo pill. And it came the time to take my placebo pills, aka to get my period. And I just kept, like I just started the next month. Am I putting myself at risk?
No, to be clear, if you're on birth control, that's managing the risk.
Okay, great.
Yeah. That's what's managing the risk.
Love
But
to hear
if you're somebody like me who, when you're not on birth control, gets your period twice a year and you're not
then it's not
managing it, then it can increase your risk.
That makes sense. Yeah, I got to be honest. I like birth control too. I will say though, what I did was really stupid because I thought I could avoid my period by just going to the next pack. And for some reason, and maybe just because it's the first one like that I'm starting in a while, I have now like it's just been an extended, like I didn't beat the system.
You can though.
I didn't this time for some reason. And instead of not getting my period at all, I got like a little bit every day for like the past 12 days. And I'm like, fuck, this. This is so annoying.
You can beat the system.
Yeah, no, it'll stop eventually.
Yeah,
I actually kind of remember this happening.
It's also tough when you go like when you're off and on.
I know. It's true. It's true. Okay, so you're married now.
Yeah.
And do you want kids in the future with your partner, or where do you stand on that? You do. Yes. Okay. So as someone who has PCOS,
yes.
Did you kind of preemptively check everything out before even like getting married in terms of fertility?
I did. So this is where I think having that diagnosis is so empowering, because it means you can take proactive steps, right? So I've known since I was in my 20s, say that fertility might look different for me than it would for somebody else. So I feel like I've been able to actually make decisions along the way that have felt very empowering, that have kind of allowed me to take charge of my fertility a little more because I had this information. So for example, when I was in my early 30s, I froze my eggs because I thought, well, if I likely might need IVF down the road, I might as well freeze my eggs when
so smart.
I'm a little younger. I think I was like 31 or 32. Went to Spring Fertility. Shout out Spring Fertility.
Oh my God, the best.
Yes, they're the best.
Wait, which doctor?
Dr. Klatsky.
Love Klatsky.
Love Dr. Klatsky.
I go to Dr. Fisher, but love them all.
They're all great. But I felt like, because I had this information, I could make that informed choice about, okay, actually, like, I want to go freeze my eggs. By the way, PCOS is not as great for getting pregnant naturally. It's actually great if you're doing egg freezing or IVF because you have more eggs.
Yeah. Not always good eggs, but more.
Not always good, but you get more. So at least there's one bright side. And then actually when I got married recently, and then as I start to think about trying, I've been able to do a lot more proactive work around trying to conceive. So I, for example, went off birth control, saw what my period looked like. I actually went on metformin, not just for trying to conceive. My Allara provider was the first provider who'd ever measured like my insulin resistance levels, because I'm naturally on the thin side. I think no doctor had ever thought to do this before, but it turns out I am insulin resistant, and you can be insulin resistant even if you're not, overweight or obese, and it still impacts your metabolism. It still impacts your metabolic health. It still leaves you at increased risk of diabetes. So I actually started metformin a little bit before my wedding, and I noticed, number one, a massive difference in terms of like carb cravings, sugar cravings, night cravings. Like I just felt so much better on it. And it also has really helped me with regulating my cycle as well.
How do we know if we should be on metformin? Because as someone with PCOS, I think about that all the time. I have a couple PCOS having friends who are on it, but no one's ever suggested it to me. So I'm like, it would have to be me being proactive and going on it.
I actually think that's an issue, right? I actually don't think it should be on the patient. Like I would not have known to ask my doctor, can you check my insulin levels? And can you tell me if metformin makes sense? My Allara provider was the one who said to me, I ran your levels, and she actually we do this special calculation called HOMA-IR. She said, your HOMA-IR is showing insulin resistance. I think metformin could be a good fit for you. So
can you still get checked even if you're on birth control? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, will your levels look the same?
It should for insulin, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
You should still be able to get checked.
Okay, I'm gonna look into this.
I would say we should chat, or you should chat with one of our providers.
I'm gonna log in.
But that is the problem. I mean, exactly what you said is exactly the problem, right? If you are somebody where you're maybe only managing it in a fertility context, then your fertility doctor is really only looking at your fertility metrics, right? Whereas in an ideal world, you'd have a provider who, and this is not the role of a fertility doctor, but in an ideal world, a provider is looking at you from a whole health perspective and saying, things like, well, if you have PCOS, you are at increased risk of diabetes. You might have a harder time losing weight. Let's check these things for you.
Right.
And that's kind of more of the whole health approach we try to take.
Yeah. What are some signs, and I'm curious if you know the answer to this one, that your hormones might be affecting your mood or dating decisions?
Oh, this is a great question. I feel like if I were a doctor or a therapist, I could give you better answers. We do know that there is a high comorbidity between hormonal health conditions and mood disorders. So for example, women with PCOS have a nearly 5 times higher likelihood of having anxiety and depression. I personally am somebody who has anxiety, and I'm sure that did not help my dating life when I was super anxious and dating. So I would say that, if you feel like something is off a little bit, it could be hormonal. It could be that in addition to managing your hormones, you also could benefit from anxiety medication or an antidepressant. We, for example, do screeners on all of our patients because we know that there's such a high overlap rate.
Right.
But I absolutely think that number one, if you have unmanaged health conditions, I think it affects your confidence in general. And
Definitely.
so I think even just getting a better handle on managing some of your health, feeling better about that can help your confidence, which in turn can, I think, help with dating.
I agree.
And also checking about things like if you have an anxiety disorder.
Yeah.
I think can be really helpful.
Where do you and Allara stand on GLP-1s? And do you believe, so I had an OBGYN come on the podcast, and she basically said more or less like anyone with PCOS would benefit from a GLP-1. So I'm just curious where you stand.
Yeah. I am a big believer in GLP-1s in the right person, and we do prescribe GLP-1s at Allara. We have a lot of patients who really do benefit from it and see amazing results from it. I think two things are really important when we think about GLP-1s. One is, do you have the right support system around you? So are you seeing a provider who's having conversations with you about the GLP-1 and what dosage is right, and what should you be on, and frankly, like, should you try something like metformin before you try a GLP-1?
Right,
conversations like that. And we also encourage our patients to see one of our registered dietitians because it can really supercharge your results and help you maintain them longer if you're also doing nutrition and lifestyle modifications, or even thinking about things like making sure you're getting enough protein can be really important. So I really like them, especially when they're supported by the right provider type. I cannot answer the question on, should every PCOS patient be on them? I think, again, that's where it is really valuable to be able to have a provider where you can try different things with and have different conversations with. Again, I found that I got a lot of benefit and metformin in a way is kind of like a cousin of a GLP-1, right?
Did metformin change your diet at all? Like, did it?
I found it really helped with cravings.
Yeah, you said that about carbs and stuff like that. But you know how when you first get your PCOS diagnosis, or maybe this is just me, someone said to me, like, you should be on the keto diet. And I'm like,
yeah, I hate all that.
Right. So did you ever feel like you had to change your diet?
I also, similarly, over the years, I've tried everything. I tried gluten and dairy free, which is complete BS. At one point, I was so scared to eat a banana because I thought I had too many carbs.
Yeah.
I have worked with my Allara dietitian. Actually, what I found really works for me is to just focus on protein and focus on a balanced plate. So focus on does my plate have protein, carb, and fat, and having less naked fats? I found actually to be really, really helpful. And I think making sure I was getting enough protein combined with the metformin really helped with cravings and sugar cravings as well.
Very intrigued by metformin now. I think I might need to give it a try. Okay, great. And then what is your how does your relationship come into play with this? How much does your partner know about your diagnosis and all of that? Like, does he, obviously it's also your business, so maybe he knows more than the average.
It's so funny. I think he'd tell you like he knows more about ovaries than he ever thought he would know in his entire life.
Yeah.
I mean, he knows about my condition. I mean, obviously, as we've talked about, trying to conceive and the fertility journey and all of this, it's something that he's aware of and is incredibly supportive of as well. I do think it's a bit of a red flag if you can't have some of these conversations with your partner. Although I would say equally, like, I don't think it needs to be the biggest deal in a dating relationship. So for example, it's not like, if it wasn't part of my business, I don't think I would have sat him down early on and said,
right.
Hey, I have this thing. But I do think it's important that you feel comfortable.
Yeah. I mean, especially if I kind of disagree. If your PCOS makes you, like, let's say never get your period, then I feel like you might have to tell him early on if, like, you already both know you want to have kids, because then it could just be a longer road kind of thing.
Yes,
you know what
I
I'm
do
saying?
think it is helpful to know. And this is also where I think having that diagnosis is so impactful. And I know a lot of women only get their PCOS diagnosis when they're going through their fertility journey, right? And I think this might have been
that was me.
Yeah, this might have been you. I think it is such a shame when, you start trying to conceive, you're excited, you try for a bit, you can't get pregnant, you don't know what's going on. And then only in that process, and only after you frankly wasted months and months, you find out that you have this diagnosis, and then you're trying to deal with the mental burden of managing this new diagnosis with still trying to get pregnant. It's all happening at the same time. I think it is really empowering as a woman to actually get testing done earlier before you're trying to conceive, get your hormones checked, see if something like PCOS or frankly a different hormonal imbalance could be going on. It could be, you could have a thyroid condition, you could have a hormonal imbalance, everything could be fine. But I think actually getting that testing done earlier before you're trying to conceive can be really helpful, because then you can plan ahead and you can maybe make different decisions versus feeling like you've wasted time already.
Totally. Are you seeing, like, in terms of people who are using Allara right now, are you seeing it mostly be, women who are married and starting to, like, or is Gen Z interested at all? And, like, if not, how do we get them to care about their health?
I think Gen Z is more and more interested. We see patients all across the spectrum. First of all, we have patients in their 20s, their 30s, their 40s. We have perimenopausal patients that we're treating and helping to manage. So I'd say we see patients across a very wide age spectrum. Our average age is in their early 30s, so it tends to overlap quite a bit with thinking ahead about trying to conceive. But we have patients who we see in their 20s for weight management because they're having a hard time losing weight. We have patients who are thinking about conceiving. And again, I think what's really valuable that we can do is, unlike a fertility clinic, where they'll say, we'll see you if you've tried for 6 months and you're ready to go do IVF.
Right.
We'll see you, a year before you're ready to start trying, and really help you maximize your fertility before you want to get pregnant. We help patients postpartum. We help patients going through menopause. So it's a pretty wide spectrum of needs, but I would say that is a pretty frequent use case that we see, is almost this like fertility prep, I would say. So not even that you want to get pregnant tomorrow, but you might be somebody like me who knows they want to get pregnant in the future. Maybe, for example, a couple months before my wedding, I started working with my provider a lot more seriously on trying to conceive prep and how do I put myself in the best position, which I have found there's very few other places that will really do that for you and help you do that.
That is so true. If you could change one thing about how people think about women's health, what would it be?
I wish people stop thinking of women's health as just fertility and pregnancy. It is very important. I know it's top of mind for a lot of people, especially me, but we don't spend that much of our life in that kind of fertility and pregnancy moment. We spend so much of it, either in our 20s, before we get pregnant, or after. And there is so much you can do if you had better information earlier in your 20s. So I really encourage women, especially in your 20s, especially before you even start thinking about kids, get testing done, and don't just get your hormones tested. Get your metabolic health looked at, get your insulin levels looked at, see what your cholesterol looks like. Because it's not just about can you get pregnant or not. It's about how do you live a really healthy life for the next, 40 years, which our hormones really impact.
Yeah, totally. This has been so much fun. Can you leave us with a quote or piece of advice? Even though I feel like you've given us some good advice so far. It doesn't have to do with health. It could be anything.
One thing I've been telling myself a lot recently is, why not me? I think a lot of times, especially as women, we kind of get in our own way. And more I've been trying to say to myself, why not me? So I think whether it's, dating and you're stressed, or work and you're stressed, I think having a bit of that mindset flip of, why not me? Why wouldn't it work out?
I love that. Abundance mindset.
Yeah.
That's great. Wait, when's your birthday again? I remember, but I remember you
next
told
week.
Me.
I'm a Pisces.
Oh, love. Yeah. Amazing. We rarely get Pisces on the
Really?
pod. Pisces are a rare sign. Like, there aren't that many Pisces. I mean, I'm just making this up, but
interesting.
At least to me, I don't meet a lot of Pisces. So.
Okay. What does it say about
You're
me?
A fish. Pisces, actually, it's funny. They're like they have a side of them that's very dreamy, and then a side of them that's very like business-like and legit.
Which I feel like is actually great for being a founder. I'm like,
exactly.
Pisces, great founder fit.
You should put it on your pitch.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Where can everyone find you, follow you and Allara?
Yeah, you can find me at Rachel H. Blank on Instagram and TikTok, and Allara at Allara Health on Instagram and TikTok, or allarahealth.com.
Love it. And we're going to put a link in the show notes so that you could check out Allara too. Thank you.
Thank you. Yay. Oh, thank you.